Hi, hello, good afternoon, good morning if you are joining us from the US. Welcome to this new episode of Additive Talks. If you are joining us for the first time, make yourself comfortable. Additive Talks are a series of panels that aims to discuss the use of additive manufacturing in a given industry. Today is about healthcare and medical, basically. So there's a lot to say, there's a lot to see. Probably, I won't spoil you now. But in the meantime, my name is Katie Sinze, managing editor at 3D Media. And I'm happy to have our wonderful speakers around this virtual table. I'll start to give the floor to those who are at home with me in Belgium. So Geert and Wesly, good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself as well as the company you represent?
So good afternoon, everybody. So please, thank you so far for following this nice webinar on additive manufacturing. So my name is Geert De Naeyer. I'm a urologist, senior consultant in AZORG Hospitals in Aalst in Belgium. We are doing, of course, prostate cancer biopsies and of prostate cancer diagnosis. And for that, we need prostate cancer biopsies. And this is what we will talk about. And I have next to me, Wesly. Yeah, present yourself.
Thank you. Thanks as well for the organization. My name is Wesly Jacobs. I'm the founder of PrintPlace. We're actually a Belgium prototyping, production and product development company, but we also have our own specializations. And one of the specializations, of course, the medical field. And within that framework, we started a collaboration, or we are setting up a collaboration with AZORG. We also moved our entire production to the hospital, let's say, within that framework.
Thank you so much. Next around this table is Luca. Luca is from Italy. And Luca, can you please introduce yourself? Tell us more about you.
Yes, thank you, Katie. Good evening, everyone. I'm Luca Borro. I'm speaking from Rome. I am in Bambino Gesù Children's Hospital in Rome, where I deal with 3D printing technologies for healthcare. In our lab, in our small lab, we produce 3D anatomical parts especially for training of surgeon before the surgical intervention complex on pediatric and children's. And we are now working on bioprinting projects, and we are very interesting to this panel with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luca. It's a pleasure to have you around this table. Last but not least, from the US, we always have one speaker from the US. And today, our speaker is Rajan. Rajan, could you please tell us more about you?
Sure. Yeah. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. It's very bright and early right here in San Francisco. It's a pleasure to talk with you, and hopefully I can shed some light on some of the topics Katie has outlined. My background, I'm a biomedical engineer by training, and I have been working in startups for the past several decades. Today, I'm going to be focusing on Kallisio, which is a head and neck cancer therapy company where we focus on side effects caused by cancer.
Yeah.
And I will be happy to answer those questions. Pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Rajan. It's a pleasure to have you around this table. So today's session is about, what it really takes to deploy AM in healthcare. We are no longer talking about, proving that AM can work, because we've already done that. We know it works. But now we want to know how far we can go to scale it, within hospitals. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A chat in front of you. Write your questions in the Q&A chat. We will pause at some point and take questions from the audience. And so let's dive in. My first question is for you, Rajan. You said, well, you run a medtech company, Kallisio, and you've developed Stentra, if I'm not mistaken. Which is a patient-specific solution, which is FDA cleared and CE marked. So my very first question for you is, what is the hardest part of the journey between regulatory compliance and clinical adoption?
Very good question, Katie. And besides the hardest part being waking up at 5:30, I think for regulatory and clinical, it's very clear. The regulatory part has a very well-defined playbook.
Yeah.
You basically start with a clear set of guidance And
Yes.
you end up following the steps, and then you know when you're at the finish line. On the clinical side, it's not that clear.
All
So
right.
for a patient-specific device that prevents toxicity, creates savings in the supportive care, avoiding
Yeah.
hospitalization and treatment interruption. But the
Yes.
cost lands on the device or procurement budget. So a clinician can love it, the data can be solid, and it
Yes.
still stalls because the value and the cost sit in a different cost center.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
clearance proves the device works. Regulatory is great. You get FDA clearance, you get CE mark, fantastic.
Yeah.
Adoption is a much longer fight to make a hospital's internal economics and operations accommodate
Mm.
something they were never built to handle. A device
Understood.
made one patient at a time. Typically they go on a shelf, pick a product and use it. In our case, it starts with first step, you want a device. Okay, let's make a
Mhm.
scan, and then you accept it.
Yeah.
So getting cleared told us the device was good. It told us nothing about whether a hospital could actually buy it, bill it,
Yes.
and fit it.
Yeah. All right. Good. Thanks, Rajan. Luca, I've seen that at Bambino Gesù, you have 11 surgical specialties. Which one benefits the most from 3D technologies, and why, according to you?
Yes, so at our hospital, we introduced the 3D printing in 2014 when this technology was still not widely adopted in a clinical and hospital settings. Ours is a large pediatric hospital with several surgical specialties, as you mentioned it. Among the surgical departments available at our hospital, the one that benefits the most from 3D technology, in my opinion, is maxillofacial surgery.
Yes.
I would say that surgical specialties involving hard tissues, such as bone, for example, are particularly interesting in the use of 3D printing technologies for pre-operative surgical planning, for example. This is because 3D printing is especially effective in producing physical anatomical models of hard tissues that closely simulate bone. In our lab, we have, for example, a fused filament fabrication 3D printer that we use exclusively to produce craniofacial bone models for maxillofacial surgeons.
Yeah.
Our maxillofacial teams use this printed model to perform the pre-plating of titanium osteosynthesis plates directly on the 3D printed model rather than shaping them on the patient during the surgery. This means that when the surgeon enters to the operating room, the titanium plates have already been bent into a patient-specific shape. We have estimated that these lead to a 40% reduction, for example, in operation time.
Awesome. All right. Geert, your collaboration with PrintPlace is at the heart of AZORG Hospitals bringing 3D printing in-house. What led to this collaboration? There's to the use of 3D printing, and why additive manufacturing rather than another approach?
Yes. So as urologists, of course, you know that prostate cancer is a very common pathology. So we need to do a lot of biopsies. I'm talking about for the whole department. We're one of the bigger hospitals in Belgium. It will be more than 1,000 biopsies a year. We need an ultrasound, of course. We need a transrectal ultrasound probe. We need needle guides just to bring the biopsy guide into the correct place based on MRI lesions or whatever. So it's actually a very common procedure. So it means that we do this on a weekly basis times.
Yes.
And that we were facing, of course, some problems with the current needle guides. You have different ultrasound machines, you have different probes. These probes are changing regularly and so on. So you feel sometimes, let's say, a problem with the current probes that you cannot get there as easily, not enough posteriorly, or whatever. And they don't get sterilized very fast. So if you plan more patients on one day, you're limited by this as well. If you work on different locations like we're doing, we have 6 different campuses or campi where we are working. So this creates sometimes, let's say, a logistical problem.
Yes.
Once it creates a patient-specific problem that's dependent on the prostate size that is very different from one patient to another. So we actually had some problems that we wanted very real patient-developed or for specific prostate sizes and whatever needle guides. And we were already a little bit in collaboration with the team of Wesly for 3D printing kidney models and so on. if you have a complex kidney tumor. So this was the inspiration to also look to them to have our needle guides printed. Instead of actually going to the different companies and ordering more guides, which are mostly quite expensive, we could really add them to a kind of patient tailored size and so on. And so this is the inspiration, or this is how we actually started this project, developing new needle guides to have logistically and more patient related needle guides available.
Thank you, Geert. Quick reminder for the audience: please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A chat. We will take some time around, 45 minutes after, the beginning of this call, and we'll answer them one by one. So each of you has taken a different approach, a different path to deploying AM, in a clinical context. What is the single biggest hurdle, obstacle that none of you has fully solved yet? And maybe I will start with Rajan on this one. Rajan, we can hear you.
All right.
Yeah, much better.
Thank you, Katie. I've been muting on and off because of my throat issues. Anyways, so I think all three, listening to Luca and Geert, it's exciting that there is so much development worldwide. I think the one thing that we have not been able to solve is that there is no single established system, where you can go from regulatory, reimbursement, or operational and design for manufacturing, all for one product which gets used and then gets disposed. So everyone has bridged that gap by hand, but none of us have made it routine.
Yeah. All right. Luca, do you want to add something?
Yeah, over the last 12 years, we have tried to introduce 3D printing in the clinical routine and the clinical practice to bring the benefits of this technology closer to the patient's bedside. Sometimes we have been very successful, and sometimes it has been more difficult for us. For example, in 2019, we implanted for the first time in Europe a 3D printed tracheobronchial splint in 3 patients affected by tracheobronchomalacia. This is a very severe airway disease, especially in pediatric patients, and it can be caused by thoracic vascular compression, prolonged intubation, and or congenital anatomical defects. In that case, we were able to implant this splint under the compassionate use framework for medical devices because those patients had no other real therapeutical options. The Italian Ministry of Health authorized us to use this approach, and fortunately, the clinical results were very good. But of course, this is not our daily clinical routine. I think that the biggest obstacle is that a large hospital is still an hospital, not a medical device manufacturing company. This means that it can be very difficult to transform an exceptional activity like the implantation of our splint or other type of medical device into a structured and regulated clinical routine, even when the technology can have major impact on the patient's life. I am not an expert on regulatory aspects because I am a biologist and I deal with clinical and biological aspects of the question, but from a regulatory point of view, producing an implantable medical device inside an hospital is a very demanding activity. Yeah.
You mentioned something that, you're a lab within an hospital, and I really want to hear Wesly on this one. Because Geert mentioned at the beginning that AZORG Hospitals, has 6 different campuses. So what's the single biggest obstacle for you today, Wesly, especially given the fact that you are also coming from, another background where you serve different other vertical industries?
Yeah, thank you. I actually wanted to pick up on that because indeed, Luca mentioned I'm not a regulatory specialist. Well, I'm becoming one at this space. But it is indeed true. So how I'm observing is that we are technically there. So we are confronted almost on a weekly or monthly basis with problems that medical personnel are finding in their day-to-day work, and we can really help them save time, improve patient outcomes on a technical level. So we're really there. And some cases are easier, some cases are more difficult, but we can solve it. But what I do see is there is regulation. I'm then speaking from the EU point of view. So the EU has regulation in place, but I do find that we really still, there's a certain degree of interpretation involved with that. We are going through that process, and I really feel that we are at the forefront of this innovation. Because it's nowhere it's written. We really have to develop it ourselves, make that translation to the workflow ourselves, and create those structures, those processes that on the one hand comply, but also allow, and this is often forgotten, operational efficiency within the hospital. It's very novel. It's also difficult, but we are making good strides on that level.
Understood.
Maybe add, I think, maybe in contrary to what Rajan said, our clinical side is easy. It's we are the urologist, and the technical side is easy as well. It's Wesly. So it's Wesly and myself sitting together and talking to each other and looking to the problem, and we can easily solve it. And what is today a problem is next week solved. Whatever. But the regulatory side, it's of course more than that. It's the hospital, it's the sterilization department, it's the regulatory biases, it's the MDR regulations that are in the Belgian government and whatever. So that makes it involves a lot of more people and parties, and that makes it more complex. And this is actually the more regulatory problem we have. But if you're only two of us, the clinical part, the technical part, that is actually easily solvable. What is today not perfect is actually next week solved.
And I think what is really important to add is that, or what 3D printing is enabling, and the combination of everything, 3D printing, to some extent even vibe coding, and it's a thing. AI is part of our everyday life. Is that it allows to a certain extent to solve the long tail of applications. And so there's this idea of the long tail. And back in the day, medical device companies were only focusing on volume because that's what enabled them to have their ROI on so their return on investments. And there's a long tail of problems in hospitals in day-to-day operations that can also save time but have less frequency. And I feel that we're now entering a stage where this kind of collaboration helps us, in the combination with 3D printing and other technologies, to really solve the long tail.
Correct. Understood. Thanks so much, Wesly, for your take on this one. Rajan, patient-specific devices are by definition made one at a time. And something that has always a little bit, intrigued me is the fact that, in healthcare, we still want to scale. I mean, we still want to explore how we can scale a business. So how do you scale? How do you build a scalable business around this type of devices, knowing that, every piece is made for one individual, one patient?
Very good question. And I think this is how we got involved. We're an industry. MD Anderson developed the technology and came to us for commercialization. So, we know that the unit is individual, but the platform is not. So we have to create a workflow that basically takes us all the way from the first scan that gets uploaded all the way to a delivery. None of it is automated, as you have pointed out. So design process, the manufacturing process, the quality system, the regulatory file, all those things need to be standardized and repeatable. You have to do that. So the clean analogy that I can compare for the general audience is like prescription lenses, clear dental aligners or custom orthotics. All these are scalable. They're done in large quantities for a large volume. So how did we do that? That's why the manufacturing and distribution partnership matters. So for us, what was important is to look at the 3D printing process with the manufacturing partner, understand all the nuances associated with each and every step, do what we call it IQ, OQ, PQ, which is basically installation qualification, process qualification. And these are process steps that have to be streamlined with
Yes.
product which is built as a test sample. Once we do that, then we have to make sure that the validation is completed as well, where we build a part, do a test on a volunteer, show it to a clinician to make sure that it all works.
Yeah.
That, I think it basically, once you've gone past that, now it's a standard process.
Yes.
But it requires a significant amount of work because each device that gets sold at the end, you
Yes.
cannot destroy it. You cannot do any tests to show that, hey, this is not working, let's repeat it.
Yeah.
But process qualification is very important. So we basically standardize the process and scale
Right.
the process more than anything else.
Understood. Well, agreed. You are currently in the patient testing phase for the custom guidance tool you mentioned earlier at the beginning of the conversation. What does that process involve? From you said, well, you're not an expert, but can you share a bit more of what the process involves from a clinical and a regulatory standpoint?
Well, the clinical testing phase involves, of course, that
Yes.
we have this 3D guides printed, that we
Yes.
see that they actually are fitting very nice on the probe of the ultrasound, that we can guide the needles through them, that we don't have too much spoiling of the material. They need to be sterilized. So this was one of the first things that we had to check. If we do the sterilization of this in this medical resin, this is kind of resin, Wesly, will that be able to sterilize it and not make it melting too much or whatever, or lose quality of strongness and whatever. And then, of course, then we will actually, when that is done, we are ready to use them on the patient to guide them through the perineum and then to bring the needle to the system. And very important to see for us is that actually the alignment, the needles are the ultrasound is actually a split screen, but we need to see the guide, the needle, in the screen. So it means that the alignment of the guide needs to be perfectly in the middle of the probe, or the center of the probe. Otherwise, we don't see the needle coming into our screen. It's just 1 millimeter to the left or the right, because it's two-dimensional. And so this is all other things that are important to set up that it works. And as I said, it's a different case when you have a very obese patient with a large perineum and a long distance from outside to the prostate. It makes a different case when you have a small patient with very small distance from outside to the prostate. A big prostate, small prostate makes a different guide that you need. So all those little things, these little variations that need to be tested are actually done and checked. And this is how far we are now, and then ready to test on some models. And then we can take the next step and start the testing on the patients. After we've gone, of course, run through eventually regulations, or maybe go for a kind of clinical trial where we will be waiting, because it's not an implantable model. It's just a tool that we use outside. It's an instrument. So we can do probably the testing in a clinical trial that has been passing an ethical committee, and that will be allow us to use it in real clinical testing.
So if I may add to that, how you should look at it is basically as another product development process, because that's what it basically is. When you go to a 3D printing or a product development company, what you do is you define the scope of the project, you define the requirements, you start an engineering process, you start prototyping, you go through the iterative process, you check the requirements, and the requirements that are here relevant are the ones that Geert also mentions, like the sterilization. You cannot have it warp in sterilization, so this is something that needs to be checked, especially for patient-specific models that need to fit a certain anatomy. So then when you check all these requirements, you for example do a simulator to simulate a real case. For an instrument, in this case, it needs to fit other instrumentation. It cannot break. You need to document all that in a Q&A system. And so this is one level. The other level was the one that I touched upon earlier with the processes, the structure. And when that is in place, then you can move ahead and do, for example, a clinical trial before implementing it in the hospital. So it is like a normal, in my point of view, a normal product development process, but a very complex one and expanded one.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Wesly. We have we still have 35 minutes left. So we'll take a break in, well, let's say 10 minutes to answer a couple of questions from the audience. In the meantime, Luca, next question is for you. The fact that you use additive manufacturing, especially for patient-specific devices for children, does that make validation a bit harder because maybe it's used on children? No?
Yes, I think that the huge anatomical variability in the pediatric population is one of the main reasons why 3D printing is so useful and so interesting in pediatric clinical practice. And this variability is not only related to anatomy at a given moment, but also to the fact that we always have to consider the growth of the child. So we can't apply the concept of standard size in pediatric settings as in adult settings. Many pediatric hospitals around the world have adopted 3D technologies to support clinical practice. So I see 3D printing, additive manufacturing, pediatrics as a very powerful resource, especially when we are dealing with complex diseases and complex surgical cases. There is also another important point in pediatric surgery. Surgeons often work in much smaller and more limited anatomical spaces compared to adult surgery. This makes preoperative planning and surgical training even more important for us. I think that 3D printing can be extremely useful because it allows us to create accurate patient-specific anatomical replicas. Surgeon can study the anatomy, plan the procedure before, and in some cases even practice the surgery before entering in the operating room. From a regulatory point of view, at least in Europe, I don't think that the medical device regulation makes the production of custom-made device more difficult, especially when the device is prescribed by a qualified health professional and manufactured by the hospital, inside the hospital for one specific patient. Of course, compliance is still demanding and everything must be properly documented and controlled. But in my opinion, the anatomical variability of pediatric patients make 3D printing, for example, not only useful, but in some cases essential to provide a truly patient-specific care, I think.
Understood. I can see that we already have a few questions, 2 questions in the Q&A chat. So Rajan, my next question is probably linked to questions in the Q&A chat. So I will ask my question first, and maybe you will take that one afterwards. So Kallisio has made the case that the patient-specific 3D printed device can reduce treatment costs, for patients who require it. But I know hospital procurement rarely work on that logic. So how do you sell that argument to the people who control the budget? And
very, very, very good and very important question, because industrialization will fail if we cannot sell the device. And you cannot really sell the device by handing over a spreadsheet to the procurement department. It's not going to work. What we've learned is there are 4 steps, and this we learned it the hard way. The first step is you make the device revenue generating for the hospital, not a pure expense. So by aligning it to a reimbursement pathway, so you have to clearly show the hospital how they're going to get reimbursed, and stops being a line item or a cost item, and start billing process right from day one. The second step is that the clinical champion that you have connected with, who agrees with your idea and has very good interest in bringing that device to his practice, he has to be on your side. So the champion has to understand all the steps, the workflow, the cost associated with his involvement, because he's going to be a supporter within his organization. The
Yeah.
third step is that you translate that value into a budget holder's own language. So as a industry, we know the value that the product is going to bring, otherwise we won't even pursue it. But how do you speak their language and say, all right, if you use our device, you're going to save time, you're going to eliminate interruptions, you're going to have chances of continued therapy for the patient. It has to be operational, because the medical side has already been proven and they already know that there is clinical benefit. But the operational side has to be very clearly stated. And the last step is that the sorry, you start with the structured low risk flow. So we go into a hospital and we tell them all these stories about here's the value, but those are our numbers. So what we have to do is give them a pilot, if you will, or a proof of value, where we say, you go ahead and take it for a test drive. We'll give you a free product, free training, whatever you need, and get them to adopt the product into their system based on their own experiences. And that's how we've been able to launch the product in the US, Switzerland, and now we're working in Germany and Belgium, hopefully Wesly Hospital.
Well, Rajan, I wanted you to directly take Elisa's question, asking the differences you see between the US and Europe on reimbursement, because this question touches a little bit upon this one as well. So, and does that impact the way healthcare professionals use your solution?
Yes.
In the Q&A chat in published section.
Yes. So the reimbursement is completely different in the two continents. Basically, US has a CPT code for our product, and it has an assigned value that the hospital gets reimbursed. Yes, it is different for all the states, and it depends between the hospital and the contract. So every interaction that you have with the hospital is unique, and you have to walk through them. In Europe, it's a bit different, and they start with so in for instance in Germany, I'll give you an example. It's a standard rate that they get for radiation therapy treatment for head and neck cancer. And your product has to fit within that standard rate. So if, let's just say, they got $10,000 for the radiation therapy treatment, and your product costs $1,000, that $1,000 comes out of that $10,000. So now you have to convince the hospital that why would they take that extra $1,000 hit in terms of value? Are they getting something back? So in order to prove that, you have to do a study. You have to show them that, look, our product is worth whatever number that is, $500, $1,000. You put it in there, do your math, do your studies, and you will see that you're saving on the operational side as well as the clinical side. Switzerland is completely different. Switzerland says, we're going to try your product for a year, and then we'll tell you what the cost is going to be. I'm still exploring in Belgium. I'm not sure how that works, but each country is different. It's almost like like the United States, where each state is different.
But I think Geert, maybe it's too early to talk about reimbursement on this type of topic in Belgium, right? Oh, what do you think, Wesly?
Well, yeah, indeed, because we are, of course, because that's already a nuance. So we're not an external MDM medical device manufacturer. We fall under the in-house exemption, which is already a completely different scenario. And I think really digging into these nuances, because there are so many, will lead us too far from the discussion and will become a very legal thing. But I think the core essence is indeed that going through that process and trying to understand what is written and what should be implemented, and getting a very good grasp on that is already step one, I would say. And at the end of the day, why are we doing it? We are doing this effort. We want to collaborate with the hospital because we see what impact we have we can impact the workflow of the surgeon. We can make sure that there is a better outcome for patients, not only within the urology field, but also within, for example, orthopedics, which is a big one, with lots of application. And that is why we're in for it, because we believe that with 3D printing we can have a positive impact on society.
Yes.
And that is the main goal. But yeah, you have to go through that process. You really have to, it's like I see it as an exploration. You have to understand what you're doing, and set it all up. Yeah. But that's innovation. If it would have been written down everywhere and you just have to follow a rule book, then it's not innovation anymore, because someone did it before you. We are now innovating, and I think that's the most important part within the hospital, within the legal framework, on the floor, what have you.
Yes. Yeah, Rajan, you wanted to add something?
Yes, to Geert and Wesly. Basically, your idea, it has crossed our mind. I used to work with a urologic company where we have used the guides, and I agree with you, it's an absolute nightmare. Have you guys thought about commercializing that? Because what you're doing is great, but it's fantastic for your hospital.
Yeah.
The moment you start saying, I want to sell it to the next hospital, you become an industry. So have you?
That was my next question, actually. So thank you, Rajan, for that.
Yeah, but so that's the thing. I think you have to think, you have to take things step by step. We started this collaboration with AZORG. You should know that AZORG is already a very big fusion hospital here in Belgium, one of the biggest. And I think it already puts a lot of meat on the table, to put it like that. And the focus right now is understanding the in-house exemption, understanding, creating the process, creating the structure, and most of all, becoming a leader in that field and showing that this kind of structure it can be beneficial for everyone involved, all the stakeholders, the hospital, the city, even the city, the hospital, the surgeon, the patient, and to make that impact. And when you do that effort and you take that leadership role, then it will also start, it's like a process of innovation, and you become an example, and I think the next step would then be in the future to talk about other hospitals.
Okay. Thank you.
It's not for the next future, I guess.
Yeah, it's not for
first develop how it works and what it should be and what are the clinical usability. And then, of course, this is
it's not for tomorrow, but I do believe that point of care medical 3D printing is the future, because there are many relevant problems in general, and we're not only talking about medical, but also medical technical problems that can be solved very easily. But what do you need? You need a very fast solution. And when you have, for me, it was even mind-boggling that this is not normal, that you do not have a workshop in a hospital where someone can go to and say, this is my problem, can you please solve it so that it improves my workflow and improves the outcome for the patient on a hospital level. And if we now see what impact we can have, then for me it's a no-brainer to do that. But indeed, of course, there are laws, there are processes, there are Q&A systems that should be respected. That's part of the deal. That's part of the innovation.
If I had something, the problem I think is that many doctors in the world are still unfamiliar with the technology, so it's very difficult to introduce it to them and get them to appreciate it. Inside the hospital, we have some clinicians that don't know this technology, so I think it's very difficult to communicate to doctor the value of our work and the value of 3D printing in a hospital context.
It's not part of that, type of
I
doctor who
think
knows the technology.
But
I think there we are also quite lucky because on the city level, on the hospital level, on the clinician level, this hospital and this region is driven by innovation in the medical field. So you really already start with that mentality, and I think it gives you a boost. And it's exactly what we need, because like this you can create showcase. You can showcase what it can do.
Yes.
But I believe that Europe and United States probably are the most difficult continents for implementing this new technology into healthcare. And I'm sure that in China and in other parts of the world, you have lots less regulations. And
really?
The clinical uptake would be much easier. And probably countries we don't know, or we don't see the communication about it. And I guess that maybe 3D printing is not really adopted in this more, let's say, lower income countries, areas, or in other parts of the world. But it's a little bit bias that we are facing, and
And what is also important to mention is that I don't think that the message should be that laws and regulations are bad.
No,
especially
sure
not. Especially not. I think it's good that they are there. But I think that at this moment, there's still that's the innovation gap that we have, because from the let's say regulatory sides, policy sides, it's also not that clear, like what could it look like. So it's like, I wouldn't call it vague, but it's like very widely defined. And then we are trying to implement it. So you need to find each other there. And that's the thing. That's the role that we are playing. But I think it's very important to also state that obviously laws and regulations are being followed, but there is like a part of interpretation that is part of that, let's say. Because it is new.
It's new, and it asks a lot of time, which should not be the case. We should find a way that we can actually say, okay, we have new technology, we have new clinical test phase or whatever. We want to have an answer on all the questions within 4 weeks or within 3 months or whatever. But we are already testing for 1 year.
1 year.
And of course, because it's not for me, it's not my main business. I mean, but we would like to go to make it faster. But of course, that's not easy. And this is something that should be better in the future, that we can actually say, okay, this is the problem. What do we need from all regulatory points? And please give us an answer in 1 month or in 3 months, and then it should be okay.
But this is also what we are focusing on right now. This is also what Rajan says, is we are focusing on processes. Because something which is patient-specific, it's just a one-off. Of course, it's like mass customization. It's not yet mass, but it's like customization.
Exactly.
So this is basically the main path of thinking, let's say, is that you standardize the process for a certain product, and you follow up the quality of the process.
Yeah. We were talking about regulation, and there is one question in the Q&A chat that I spotted exactly about this topic, and it's from Eric Bullen, question number 5. Hello, Eric. I hope you're fine. So Eric's question is this one. The MDR is not there to make your life harder. It's to protect patients, making sure your 3D printed device is safe and effective. Commercial manufacturers take years to take a new device to market, whereas we can take a custom-made medical device to a patient in record time. Specifically for 3D printing, process validation is crucial. How do you make sure your 3D prints are of consistent quality? That's a tough question, Eric.
No, it's not. It's not. Yeah, okay. It's a tough. It's depending on. Hi, Eric. By the way, this has everything to do with. Again, earlier I mentioned something. I'm not not going in too much depth for this call. But earlier I mentioned or I made a comparison with the product development process. For example, if you are to make an industrial component or whatever, it also needs, for example, for aerospace or what have you, like medical is not the only application of 3D printing. Of course, there are also processes that you need to follow, and there's also a repeatable outcome that you if you are a self-respecting production company, there is always the premise of saying, when we go into production, there is a repeatability in what you do, and there is a consistency and a predictable outcome. And this has to do with process documentation, effectively in this case, a Q&A system. For example, making sure that the part is always printed in the same orientation, for example, as has been proven during the product development or the iterative prototyping process. So it's the documentation of that process and making sure that you're always following the same process that contributes to that repeatability.
So, Katie, if I can build on what Wesly just said, this was, Eric's question is spot on. When we make one part, how do you confirm? And what we've done is we basically take the initial scan. We have a step after the product is manufactured. We compare a product, which is a stentor device like this, to the original CAD. And based on that comparison, we know that what we did scan, we modified it, and it still measures the same thing within the required specification. And then we ship the product. In the hospital cases, they have a lot more liberty. But what Wesly was saying, that if you want to scale internally, then you have to follow all the steps from beginning.
And it also depends on the application. You have instruments which are static and not changing geometries. Then there are patient-specific devices. I mean, there are many applications, and each of them have their own specific process. So.
Yeah. Luca,
I think that the software can contribute to raise the quality, internal quality. For example, our current internal quality control system is based on a standardized workflow with multiple verification steps. In our hospital, we check the quality of the source imaging data, the acquisition protocol of DICOM from our radiologist. We validated the segmentation and 3D reconstruction against the radiological images, and we perform a technical review of the final 3D model before printing. And we have developed an internal software with our IT engineering department that assure the validation of our 3D segmentation by a radiologist. And we use, for example, materialized mimics flow to share the model with the measurement possibility tools on the DICOM images. And the final approval is usually performed in collaboration with the clinician or surgeon before the model is used for preoperative planning, for example.
Okay.
Katie, a question for Luca and Geert. Basically, a quick one.
Yes.
You both have implemented a system within the hospital. Do you also have the same burden like we do in the industry to go back and convince them that, hey, look, if you hadn't used this, we would have either lost the patient or lost some time or, not saved the money that we're saving?
Okay, so sorry, can you repeat the question? I can't hear you.
Sure. So basically what I'm saying is that you both have implemented, you and Geert have implemented a process for 3D printing. And, as an industry, we have the burden to show them before they adopt our product. You have the luxury of being in the hospital and you have adopted it. Do you also have to convince your COO or whoever is the money man that, hey, look, if we hadn't done this, we would have not saved the patient or saved the the operations?
Yeah, we often have this problem. For example, in the maxillofacial surgery scenarios, we have demonstrated that our model can contribute to reduce the surgery time about for 40%. This is very interesting topic for us because this reducing bleeding time during the operation, the anesthesia time, and the cost for the operating theater. So we can do that in our hospital.
What about you, Geert?
The same for us. We have to convince them that if we want to do this on multiple locations, okay, we have to make the investment of buying different applicators or needle guides of the standard companies. That takes a lot of money. And here I think we have an easy 3D printed tool that is safe to use, and that will, of course, extend our possibilities to look at to use it on more places, and that will make our biopsies actually better done. So we will not lose a patient probably, but if we can provide more, a biopsy is an easy case. I mean, it's as I said, it's 1,000 cases a year. If we can do it on different locations, easy setting, quick, have the biopsy done quickly. You know, that's what we want to do. We want to make the diagnostic process easy. You come today to me. You see, okay, your MRI of the prostate shows a possible lesion there on the right side. Okay, go next door. I will do the biopsy today now. And even if you're the 10th case of the day or the first case of the day, whatever, we will have the possibility to do maybe 10 or 7 cases. I'm not, oh, sorry, you're the 5th case of today. We only have 4 applicators that are sterile. So please come back tomorrow. No, that's not the case. We want to do it immediately. We want to make it easy and simple. Yeah.
Yes.
And on our end, I think we also are a contributing factor, of course, but early on in the process, because there are surgeons who are, of course, more adept with 3D printing and more easily spot the right applications for 3D printing, because that's another story, of course. And then there are surgeons which are purely innovative, and they say like, hey, you're here on the campus, you can do product development. This is a problem that I have. Would it be useful to use 3D printing to solve this? And for us, it's also important to think within the terms of 3D printing / manufacturing. And if there are cases with, let's say, more volume or a higher frequency or a bigger impact overall, then those are being, of course, prioritized, or the feasibility of that is higher than cases where, for example, you do a whole lot of engineering for just one component with a limited impact. And this is part of our contribution and communication as well.
Understood. There's one question that touches upon quality management system for you, Luca. Question number 1 in the Q&A chat, but I think you already, discussed that a little bit. Would you like to add something else? Question number 1, what does your quality management system look like?
Yes, I think that as I said before, we have an internal quality control system in which we share the clinical case between a biomedical engineering department, our 3D lab, and the radiologist. This system is composed by, for example, software for sharing the DICOM data and segmented 3D model in the same screen. So the clinician can see the DICOM of CT, of MRI or MRI, and linked to this type of DICOM images, there is a 3D model that we have segmented. Before the printing, there are a very interesting process. Upstream, there are much more complex processes. In our case, these processes have been developed over many years. For example, as I said, we have a tracking system of our 3D reconstructed model. We use Materialix products. That is for us interesting quality software in the market. very often we stay at the stage of segmentation for several days because we share the segmented model for radiologists, and the radiology requires some modification on models, and we need to refine again, improving the anatomical 3D model before we even start thinking about sending it to the printer. So in my opinion, the real value of these technologies inside the hospital is not only in the printed model itself, but in the ability to create a strong professional and human network of collaboration within the hospital. Also, it's very important to helping clinicians understand how useful 3D technology can be in surgery and in medicine. And this is not a trivial aspect. It is something extremely valuable that happens well upstream of the actual 3D printing phase of process.
Thank you so much, Luca.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Richter. Robotics, question number 4, and I think maybe it's for Geert. Robotic surgery seems to have a well-established adoption pathway. What do you think I think it's missing to point of care AM to get to that level? Geert, you are the only one I know around this table who has expertise in robotic surgery. So that's the reason why I'm thinking that maybe this question is for you. So
Okay,
if you want to take that one.
What I think is the mission to the point of care additive manufacturing to get to that level.
Yeah, well, if you compare the expertise you have in robotic surgery and now that the expertise you are building up with 3D printing, you know, do you think point of care AM advances maybe faster than robotic surgery because you have experience in both? Let's say.
Yeah. I think robotic surgery, of course, is a whole process of the surgery where you have the technical part and everything that is needed to have the certification and the network, the proctoring and so on, and then the commercial ecosystem. The additive manufacturing to get to that same level, of course, that's. I don't think that the pathway will be that difficult for additive manufacturing to get to that level because I think it's an easier workflow in comparison to robotic surgery. So I think the mission for point of care AM will be easier than robotic surgery with proctoring and so on. If it's an easy guide and if it's an easy thing that is printed, I think you don't need that many proctoring and so on. So I guess it will be an easier mission to get there than robotic surgery. And maybe let me quickly answer the last question by Steve. The use of other 3D printed devices that will save your practice. Well, we know that yet. We're still in the testing of the biopsy guide, but actually, as I already told to Wesly, maybe if we do implantation of gold anchors just for the guidance of radiotherapy and 3D reconstruction and so on, I think we see an application that it has a possibility there as well because we need to avoid the transrectal implantation. We want to go for transperineal, and it's a different way, of course, than we do now. So once we've done with this, we have another project to start, Wesly.
Yeah.
One by one, I would say.
One by one. Step by step.
Yeah, okay.
No, but I also think what is also important to mention with regard to that comparison between robotics and AM, it's the scope of what you're doing. We are currently, if you're talking about instruments, if you're talking about guiding systems or at least applications that are not left behind in the body, you have just very limited contact. It's a completely different story than when you have an SLM, selective laser melting facility somewhere, or printing custom-made patient-specific craniomaxillofacial plates which are being implanted and stuff, or acetabular cups or what have you. So it's a completely different scope. It's a completely different story. So it also depends. You have to compare apples with apples, basically. It's very hard to compare apples with peers. It's a different industry.
Yeah, understood. Well, 2 minutes left before the end of this conversation. Well, last question is just for all of you. Wesly or Luca or Rajan, do you have any questions for one another? Like maybe Wesly or Geert or Luca?
I think I just have a contribution to make, and I think what can be very useful is that everyone who is working on 3D printing for medical applications within a certain fields, in this case, for example, in-house, I think it could be useful in Belgium or even on a European or an international level to more exchange experiences, because I think we're all fighting the same battles, but just on our own, in our own
your own
country,
bubble,
in our own city.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be gained by exchanging experiences, but also by exchanging applications, because something that can have an impact in a hospital somewhere in France, for example, can also have an impact here. And I think all together we can have a joint impact on the well-being of medical personnel and patients in Europe and other countries.
Thank you so much, Wesly.
Yeah, we need more opportunities like that today.
Thank
Perhaps
you.
right inside our hospital, hopefully.
Thank
But
you. Thank you.
It's change management, and you have to drive it. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would echo what both of them are saying. Basically, Katie, having these kinds of forums is very helpful. I mean, now I know that somebody in Belgium is working on a thought that I had a few months ago. And I'm like, somebody's already doing it. So why not collaborate and why not learn and implement? Because we're not, point of care and industry is not competitors. We're collaborators. They go deep and we go wide. And, both are helpful. Our focus is to spread to all the hospitals and not just one or two. And the only way we can do that is by learning from Wesly and his experiences and Luca and his experiences. So I love this presentation, Katie.
Thank you so much.
Hope we can have more of these.
Yeah, hopefully, yes. So thank you so much. This is the end of our Additive Talks or LCAL 3D printing session. Well, you've heard it. This is not the end of the panel. We'll have more conversations around this topic because we need more exchange to make this topic advance. And there's so much more that we need to discuss, that we need to exchange all together. But in the meantime, I want to thank Luca, Geert, Wesly, and Rajan for taking the time to share their expertise today, their insight, and I truly hope what they've shared is has been useful to you wherever you are in the world. So thanks for listening to our insights into the world of AM. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us around this virtual table. I'll be in touch for the next panel. Stay tuned and stay safe wherever you are in the world.
Thank you, Katie. Bye, everyone. Thank you.